Hi and welcome to another tutorial from Blender Insight, and this time I was thinking that we should create another pattern, and this time I have selected this common pattern that you have on wooden parquet floor. So you can see it's like 5 or sometimes 4 small pieces that goes in one direction, and then it just changes in 90 degrees and goes in the other direction, and then you get a repetitive pattern in this way. So as I see it, it's more like tiles, and every tile is rotated 90 degrees. So we can start with one of these tiles here to be able to build a complete floor later on. So it's 5 pieces that we should produce. So we start then with some texture coordinate. So Shift A, input texture coordinate, and we use the UV. And if I take the UV to the base color, then I got this little dot here that is dark and 0, and I would like that to be up here, because then I can then start here as a base for one of these, and then have one here and one here, so we get some even edges. So let's try to do that by moving this using a subtract, and then we use a multiply. So I take and press Shift A, go to converter and select vector math, and here can I change this into subtract. So, and then I change those two to 0.5, and as soon as I do that, you can see that this is now moved here. Everything here is negative, and the maximum negative right now is 0.5, and then on the other side everything is positive and it's 0.5. It's much easier to work with -1 and +1, so I multiply it by 2, so Shift D, multiply by 2, so we have that in. So now we have -1 and a +1, and as I said before, I would like to have like edges that are the same, so I would like to have this as 1, this is 1, and 0 here. So we add an absolute that then will transform all the negative values to positive values. So I can just press Shift D to duplicate, and I can add an absolute, and now you can see we get these lines here. But now it's time to try to make this floor tile here, so I need to separate it so I can get out some black and white that I can work with. So I select this and write separate XYZ, and if I take the X in here, I get this line here. And that's really nice because that is a starting point for this, but I would like the edges to be dark and not this part here. And it's easy fix, because after the absolute I can just do a subtract. So if I take 1, subtract it with this value, then this will be reversed. So I press Shift D on the absolute, and then I change the subtract and put this to the bottom, and in the top I put 1. And now you can see we have the dark in these edges here, and we have white in the center. So now we have something to work on. But we need 5 of those and not just 1. So to increase it to 5, we can scale it up 5 times. So I can take the subtract, Shift D, and change this to scale and change it to 5. And then we get 1 of these. To get 5, then we need to split this from 0 to 5, because when we scale it up, it's like multiply it. So from the beginning, it's 0 to 1. With scale, it's 0 to 5. What I would like to do is to have 0 to 1, and then repetitive pattern 0 to 1, 0 to 1, and so on. And that I get with a fraction, because a fraction will just use the fractional part of an integer, so from 0 to 0.999, and then it starts over again. So I press Shift D to duplicate, and then I change this into fraction. And as I said, we now get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces. And the next step here is to change this tube looking thing to be more flat, and that we can do with the map range. So here in the end, we add a map range to filter out those things that are going up, so it gets more flat. So I press Shift A again, go to Converter and select the map range. And all I have to do now is to change the from max here to a smaller number. And when I do that, you can see it starts growing in the center out towards the edges, and it gets more and more flat. So now we have it good flat here, could be even lower, but we can take that later on. We just do the base right now. So now we have these 5 here, and the next thing is to make it repeat, so we get it 5 in this direction, and to make that repeat we just go from the beginning and say that we need more of these. We need like I don't know how big the floor should be, but we take the scale here and add more, and then you can see we get a lot more here. We also add a fraction, so Shift D, we add a fraction. But the problem right now, if I add this fraction here, is that we just increase the amount of lines. We need to like rotate it in some way as well. And to do that, we can then add a rotate here, but we also need to tell when we should rotate. And then we can use floor, because if you use floor here, so I write floor, then it will just take the integer part of this, which means that we don't get 0.5 and so on, we only get 0, then we get 1, 2, 3, 4. So we get 4 different values here. So those values we can use to rotate all these small pieces here. So every time we get a value out, we can start to rotate it, but we don't want it to rotate for every time we change, because we would like it to go 1 here, and then we would like this to be changed, and then that should be the same as well. So it's like going back and forth in some way. And I think we can fix that with the modulo. So we go and take a modulo here and change this to 2. And then I put that together. And right now, if I just take this to an output, we can take this output here so you can see how it looks. You get this pattern here. So it's close, because that means that we can use those values to rotate, but right now it's not singular value. We have one value for the X direction and one for the Y direction. So let's make it to a scalar, meaning using like black and white, using only one value, by separating this. So separate X, Y, Z. And then you can see we get this X here, and we get this in Y here. So we have 0, 1, 0, 1, and so on. And that we can use to change. But we would like it to have in both directions. So we just add these together. So Shift A, Converter, Math, and then we add these. So now we get 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, and then 2. Because now both 1 and 1 meets. So it gets to be 2. But if we just say that we change it 90 degrees every time, everything will work, because then we can have standing, and then we lay them down, standing, lay them down, standing, lay them down, and so on. And this will also be a difference over 1. So this is 0 to 1, this is 1 to 2. So it doesn't matter that this is 2, we should rotate with a change. When it changes 1 step, we rotate it 1 step. So with this information, we should be able to make this rotation. So let's try it. So we take this here, and then I add a rotate before the fraction here. So let's take this and move it a bit here. So we have it like that. And we add a vector rotate. So Shift A, Converter, vector rotate, put that in here. And now we can put this angle in here, and you can see we get, it almost works anyway. We get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it changes direction. We get 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it changes direction. So So in theory it works, but it doesn't work practically, or how it doesn't work in real life. It works in theory. So we need to change this. And why is it like this? Well, the value that you put into the angle here should be in radians. And now we have value 0, 1, 2. So we don't have it in radians. So we need to transform this 1, 2 to be like 0 degrees and 90 degrees and so on, but in radians. So we will add the pi here. So half of the pi will work to change this 90 degrees. So I add a multiply, so Shift D, and then I change this to multiply. And then I go in and write this little sign here, because that means that I can now just write pi and then divide it by 2. And we have a pattern that is very similar to this. So now we have the base in, and we can start adding all these small things like the different colors and so on this. And the good thing right now is that we can easily control. If we want more tiles, we just change the scale in the beginning. So now I have a floor with 10 times 10 tiles. And if I would like to change the amount of small pieces in every tile, I just change the scale here. So if I want 4 instead, I just change it to 4, and we get 4 pieces here. So you have like a really good base here to play with, and all we have to do now is to, as I said, add colors and patterns in. So for colors we can use the same method as we did for rotation, meaning that we can use floor, because then we get a new value for each little piece here after the scale that we have here in the end. So I go in here and I write floor like this, and then I can do a separate of x, y, z. And if I now take the x value from here and just drag it to the base color, you can see now that I get 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 on each direction. So we get different values out, and that we can use to produce different values on the small pieces here. So that will be great, but we also need to mix it out a bit. So to make it a bit better, we add a white noise texture. So Shift A, texture, and the white noise texture. And we can now use the X value here. So if I use 1D here and put that in here, then you see that I get random values here. But the problem is that it is repetitive. You can see these are exactly the same as these, and these are exactly the same as these, and so on. So we need to have some variation into it in between these tiles as well. And that we can do by using the starting point here, because we have floor here as well that changes, and we get different values here and so on. So if we add that information into the tiles over here, then we would be able to get more random values in. So we will try that. So I would press Shift A, and then I go to Converter and combine X, Y, Z. So for X, I will use this one, and then I can change this to 3D. So I go 3D here, and I take this in here. And right now you can see it's still a repetitive pattern, but now we can take the information that we have from over here to here. So then I can take this, we already have a separate here, so I can use the X or the Y here, but the problem by using it is that we have already made it repetitive by using the modular here. So we need another separate that we put in the floor, so we get new numbers every time. So I duplicate this, Shift D, and take it from this floor instead. And then I can use the X and Y here to put it into my random that is back here. So if I now go out, it looks like this. So I take this from the first scale and floor into the second part here. So just a long drag between these two. So one X to the Y and this Y to the Z. And now when I've done that, so move back a bit, so we have it like that. Then you can see it's not repetitive anymore. So now we get this starts with like a light gray, but this starts with the dark gray. This starts with almost white, but this starts with some gray. So now we really have a random value that we later can use both for the color but also for the pattern. So we really get random values in all the way. So we can start with the color. So to start with the color, we need some changes between these values here. And the easiest way when we are working with, let's say, the same scale, everything here is brown, it's just different types of brown, is to use a hue saturation value. So I press Shift A, go to color, and here you can see we have hue saturation value. So I take that in, and then I can use this value to the hue to change this. And if I just take the right in here and change this to surface here, you don't get anything because we need a color here. So if I click here, take this one and select something here, like this color there, you then get quite different colors here. And that is because the variation from the white noise texture is too big. And it's also so that you should start on 0.5. So we need a base of 0.5 and then some small variation from this one. So we could have that in, and to make it good, we can use a multiply add. So Shift A, go to converter and math, and we add this to a multiply add. Because then we can add 0.5, so we have that as a base. We can take the value here and we can multiply it with a very small value like this. So now we get something that could be useful. We can try with a negative value, then it looks like this, a positive looks like this. Could also change this to perhaps something darker. So we get more brown in, something like that, and then just change this to a really small value, so 0.05 or something like that. But now we see that, okay, now we get smaller variations between everything. So yeah, we can play with that as much as we want to, but we have that like this. If we want it brighter, then we just take up the value a bit. And if we want more saturated, then we can just change this to a lower number here. So higher number, more saturation, a lower number, lower saturation. So we can play with that as well. And we can also play with the factor to change it a bit. So if it's 0, we just use that color. And if it's 1, we just use the complete variation here of the saturation, hue and value. So that is things we can play with. Now we have some variation in, and we can have that as a base. But then you see we have variations inside every piece as well. So I think we should go one step more than this. And then we can use a normal noise. So Shift A, and then we can use texture and the noise texture. And we can change this to 4D, because then we can use the white noise texture information into the W here to get different noise patterns on each little piece here. We could also connect this vector to UV, so Shift A. We can use the U, let me see which is best. It's far away, the other UV, so we can take this one, duplicate it, Shift D, and put it here. It's easier to work with. And take the UV here. So now we have the noise in here, and we can then mix that with another hue saturation value, or we can put it into some of these. So we can put it in for, like, let's say the saturation here, or the value, and you can see we get some noise in that then controls everything. And we can do it with small values or big values, and as you can see it might be a little bit too much to work with everything, so we can then add a multiplier here. So Shift D to take this one for instance, and then we just change this to multiply, and when we have saturation you can see that 1 is like standard, 0 is no, so we should also add here. So we should run a multiply add with 1, we put it into the saturation here, and now when I increase the multiply here and decrease this, you can see that we get variations on every little piece here. So now we have that as well, and I can just small changes here to get it. We can play with that later on. Yes, we have something that I think is rather okay anyway. So I don't know. It's also depending if you're using an HDRI or something. But now we have something. We say that this is the color, but we also need the structure with all the lines here. And these lines are more or less like waves. So let's use a wave texture as well. So Shift A, texture, and a wave texture. So I can use the same UV here for this. And if I take this to the output, just to look at it, it looks like this. So we need to use this for X and Y direction that we have from the starting point here. So we cannot use this UV, but if I go to after the rotation here and take this one instead, you get it as you should do here. So the first one was standing, then was laying down and standing and so on. So we use this because now we have already changed it, and we can go and use that here. And to make some distortion, we then just change here a bit, and we can change the scale and the detail, can take up that, and the detail, scale, and roughness and so on. Just so we have something, but it's not so similar to this. We need something more, and to make more out of this we can combine this wave with the noise texture. So Shift A, texture, and the noise texture, and that one we can use 4D on and put the result from the wave texture into the result of the noise texture. In this case we can then use the same vector that we had up here, so another long line to the noise here, so the noise will go the same way as the wave texture is doing. So with that, if we take that to the factor, now we get something that is more like these things here, but could be that it's a little bit too distorted. Then just take down the distortion here a bit, and you can then play with the detail and roughness and the linearity on the noise here, and also the scale and so on, so we get everything here. So now we have the pattern like this, and we also have the color that we had up here, and what we need to do now is to combine these two. So we can do that by another use saturation value, or we can do a color ramp, or we can do a mixed color. So we have a lot of different ideas that we can use to make this happen, and it's more or less to just select one of those. So let's say that we are using use saturation value again, so Shift D. Then we can take the value that we got from this to the color here, and we can control the output. Right now it's just the color, exactly the same, but we can then change this information with this factor. So if I put that to the U, you can see we get this. If I put it to saturation, we get this, and if I put it to value, we get this, which is the most closest to this one. So we can use this to get in all that information, and it could be that we need to take up more value in the base here, so we have it really high up, or just change the color down here so we get it like this. And as I said, we can play with that later on if we want to. So what we now lack is like the base that we had from the beginning, which is then the map range that we had up here. So it looks like this. So we should combine this information with that. And in this case, we should use mix color, because 0, which is then black, is then the edges. So we can use the factor of mix color. So Shift A, color, and a mix color. And then I can take the result to the factor here. And all that I did now with the pattern and the color, I can now just put into B. And here we can take that, we can take the material output to the BSDF, so we can play with it, and we can take the result to the mix here. So now I get this in, and now I can see it's bright here, and we would like this to be dark. So we can just take it down to this, so we have it something like that. Perhaps some brownish. So now we have something here. However, right now, so what we don't have here is some variation on these edges. They are like very, very straight, but it's very easy to change, because we have this map range, the last piece that we had when we created the base pattern, where we changed the edge width with this from max. So if I increase it, you can see it increases, and if I decrease it, it decreases. So all we have to do really is to add another noise texture that runs this one. So if I go here and press Shift A again, and then I use texture and the noise texture and put that into the from max, it will then make all these lines here, and we can play with detail, roughness, electronality, and so on. You can see we get different changes here. However, right now it's a little bit too width. The width is too big, so we can narrow it down, and we can use a multiply, or we can use a map range. It's up to us. We can use a map range here. Shift A, convert the map range, because I think we get more control using the map range. Because here we can change a lot of stuff to get it more contrast and so on. You can see we get it really, we get like a line in the center that is like the base, and then we get some spill or some wear on the sides here, and then we can try to increase or decrease these values to get it to be really narrow. But you should be careful, as you can see here, we will not let it go over, because what we would like to have is an output that is between 0 and 0.1. So we just play a little bit here first, and then we go down here and then decrease it to make it look good on the edges here. So could be like that, perhaps even more. But now we have it in here. So, and now you can see we have some where that goes outside, and that is because it's the control here. So if we make it more soft here, some of that goes away. So now I think everything looks fine. So now we're really, really close, and everything we have to do now, more or less, is more small tweaks from everything here. So it could be that we should have this to 0.2 or something like that to get it more like that, and it could be that we should change this value to perhaps the other way around, just like this, to get it more yellow. Or yeah, you can, as I said, you can play with it as you want to. So if I now take up this, you will get more yellow, and if I take down, you will get more red out of this. So now we have that, and finally I would like to have some bump mapping, so we don't have it really, really flat. And then we can just use see what is best to use. We can use the factor from the noise texture. If I take that in and just look at it, it looks like this. So if we mix this information with the map range here, it would be good to have for the bumps. So I press Shift A, converter, math, and I take this and that together. So now we have that. It looks like this, but if we use minimum here instead, that will be great for the bump map. So take those two, we do a bump map here, so we use Shift A again, go to vector bump, take that to the height and this to the normal, and then we of course need output, so we take the output here, and right now it's too strong, so we take it down a bit and take this down a bit as well, so we have it like that. And then perhaps we have to, it should have higher roughness, so we have that in as well. So now we have everything in and it's easy to control, and we can add some HDRI in here to make this look more alive. So I will just pick an HDR, see if I have some. I will go, I can move it in here so you can see. So here I go to the word properties, go to color, change this to environment texture, change to open, select some HDRI. We can take this one for instance. So now we have that in, and I then can drag this out again so we get more space to look at. So now we get more brightness in on our floor and everything looks nice. And now we also see that perhaps we could take the strength and distance down even more on this. And as I said, the rest of the things here is just fine tuning. So you can add different colors here, you can play with it, you can add, instead of just using use as range and value, you can add a color mix, or you can add a color ramp or whatever, just to do whatever you want. But now you have all the pieces in here, and now you can play with it as you would like to get your floor exactly as you would like to have it. But this is how you do it, and hopefully you have learned something how you should think and build. So we started with one tile, try to make that okay in the base. Then we created a floor, and after that we added all the details. So in the end then we got this here, and as I said, then it's a lot of tweaking that you can do, but we have all the pieces in right now. So hopefully you enjoyed this as well, and I just say bye for now and see you later.